My name is Elaine Parker, and I was 39 years old the night I watched my son-in-law drag my daughter by her hair across the floor of a crowded restaurant while her little boy screamed for her. If you had been sitting where I was, close enough to hear the sound of her pain, close enough to see everyone else freeze in silence, I wonder what you would have done. It was supposed to be a celebration. We were at a cozy Italian place in downtown Chicago, the kind with warm lights and black and white photos on the walls. My grandson, Eli, had just turned 5. He wore a paper crown the hostess gave him and swung his legs under the table as he waited for cake. From my seat, I could watch him and his mother at once, something grandmothers learn to do instinctively, the way you learn to breathe without thinking. Hannah looked tired that night, even in the soft blue dress she'd bought on sale after a long shift at the clinic. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes held the kind of exhaustion no sleep could fix. When she reached for her napkin, her sleeve slipped just enough for me to see a faint, yellowing bruise circling her wrist that a mother always knows, though sometimes knowing is the heaviest burden on earth. Marcus was on his second glass of wine, laughing too loudly at his father's stories. Gerald, a retired police officer, had chosen the bottle himself, reminding the waiter twice that 30 years on the force had taught him how to pick quality. Linda sat beside him with folded hands, laughing when she was supposed to and never when she wanted to.
When the waiter arrived with dessert, Eli's chocolate cake drew a chorus of claps. Hannah leaned in to help him blow out the candle. When the waiter set a small plate of tiramisu in front of her, she smiled politely and said she was allergic to nuts, asking if she could have the fruit tart instead. Such a simple request. Marcus's chair scraped back. His eyes darkened. "Why do you always have to make everything difficult?" he snapped. And before I could even breathe, he reached down, grabbed a fistful of her hair, and yanked her backward hard enough to make her cry out, hard enough to make the room go silent, hard enough to destroy the last bit of denial I'd held onto. That was the night everything broke. But it wasn't where the story began. Hannah met Marcus on a warm June afternoon at a coworker's barbecue, long before any of us guessed what he was capable of. She came home glowing, the kind of glow that slips into a woman's voice when she feels truly seen. She told me how he stood beside her at the grill, asking about her patients, her favorite books, and the places she dreamed of visiting. He listened, really listened, as if every word mattered. I let myself believe she had finally met someone good. 2 weeks later he knocked on my door with an expensive bakery pie, complimented my garden as though reading a script, offered to fix the loose hinge on my screen door, and carried in the grocery bags I'd left in the car that he called me Mrs. Parker even after I asked him to use my first name. Charming, polite, attentive. I could see why Hannah's face softened when he walked into a room. Still, something inside me stirred. A mother notices harmony, but she also notices when there's a strange note in the melody. When Hannah invited me to dinner at their new apartment, I arrived hoping to approve of anything that made my daughter happy. The place was spotless, not clean but spotless. Every pillow perfectly placed, every picture frame angled the same way. Hannah looked tired that night, even in the soft blue dress she'd bought on sale after a long shift at the clinic. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes carried the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. When she reached for her napkin, her sleeve slipped just enough for me to see a fading bruise around her wrist. Faint, yellowing, but real. A mother always knows, though sometimes knowing is the heaviest burden to carry. Marcus was already on his second glass of wine, laughing too loudly at his father's stories. Gerald had chosen the bottle himself, proudly reminding the waiter that 30 years on the force had taught him how to pick good wine. Linda sat beside him, hands folded neatly, laughing whenever she was supposed to and never when she truly wanted to. When dessert arrived, Eli's chocolate cake drew giggles and claps, and Hannah leaned forward to help him blow out the candle. When the waiter set a plate of tiramisu in front of her, she smiled politely and said she was allergic to nuts, asking if she could have the fruit tart instead. Such a simple request. Marcus's chair scraped back and his eyes darkened. "Why do you always have to make everything difficult?" he snapped. Before I could breathe, he grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her backward hard enough to make her cry out. Hard enough to silence the entire room. hard enough to shatter the last piece of doubt I'd been clinging to. That was the night everything broke. But it wasn't where the story began. Hannah met Marcus on a warm June afternoon at a coworker's barbecue, long before any of us understood what he was capable of. She came home glowing, her voice softening the way a woman's does when she feels genuinely seen. She sat at my kitchen table kicking off her sandals, telling me about the man who had stood beside her at the grill asking about her patients, her favorite books, the places she wanted to travel. She said he listened, really listened, as if every word mattered. For a moment, I let myself believe she had met someone good. 2 weeks later, he knocked on my door with an expensive bakery pie. He complimented my garden as though following a script, offered to fix a hinge on my screen door, and carried my groceries from the car. He called me Mrs. Parker even after I told him to use my first name. Charming, polite, attentive. I could see why Hannah's face softened around him. But even then, something inside me tugged. A mother notices harmony, but she also notices when a melody has a strange note. When Hannah invited me to dinner at their new apartment, I arrived hoping to approve of anything that made my daughter happy. The place was spotless. Not clean. Spotless. Every pillow perfectly arranged, every photo frame angled the same way, the kitchen counters gleaming as if no one actually cooked. Hannah used to be delightfully messy, leaving half-read books on the couch and mismatched mugs in the sink. This version of her home looked curated, like a showroom she was afraid to disturb. She cooked a beautiful meal, and Marcus hovered behind her like a shadow. When she laughed too loudly at one of my stories, he placed a hand on her shoulder and she lowered her voice instantly. When she reached for the salt, he moved it closer before she could touch it. When I asked if she still met her coworkers for coffee on Fridays, he answered for her, saying those friendships were bad influences. She didn't correct him. Later, while clearing the table, she bumped her hip on the counter and winced. It was too sharp, too practiced. Her shirt lifted just enough for me to see a fresh thumb-shaped bruise near her ribs. She tugged her shirt down quickly when she noticed me looking. "I'm fine," she said before I could ask. "Just clumsy." Her voice trembled for half a second, long enough for that tug in my chest to tighten. After dinner, Marcus walked me to my car. He leaned his forearm on the roof as I opened the door, blocking me in place. His smile was polite, but his eyes were not. "Hannah tells me you worry a lot," he said. "She's lucky to have someone looking out for her." The tone chilled me, like a compliment hiding a warning. In the weeks that followed, Hannah drifted further away while still standing right in front of me. She canceled our Saturday breakfasts because Marcus had surprised her with plans. She stopped wearing bright dresses and switched to long sleeves, even during warm weather. She never stayed on the phone long. She always had something to do, somewhere to be, someone waiting. One evening after a double shift, I brought her groceries and let myself in when she didn't answer right away. The TV was off. The lights were dim. She stood at the kitchen counter staring at the refrigerator, gripping it so tightly her knuckles were white. Her lip was split slightly on one side. When I asked what happened, she claimed she'd bitten it when Eli kicked during the night. The explanation unraveled too quickly. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and she flinched, subtly but unmistakably, like someone who had been bracing for impact long before I arrived. "Baby," I whispered. "Look at me." She did, but only for a moment. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Please, Mom, just drop it." I wanted to pull her out of that apartment and never look back, but fear had wrapped itself around her so tightly I couldn't reach. She became pregnant the following spring, and for a brief moment I let myself hope life was giving her a fresh start. She came to my house on a rainy afternoon, holding a tiny sonogram photo with trembling joy. I hugged her and felt her shoulders relax for the first time in months. But Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, bursting in like a man who needed an audience. He held her waist with one hand and the sonogram with the other, talking about names, nursery themes, and baby-proofing before I even had a chance to speak. When I asked how Hannah was feeling, he answered for her. She just smiled weakly. Over the next months, his attention hardened into control. He insisted she stop working nights, then suggested cutting her hours, then implied that once the baby was born she shouldn't return to the ER at all because a good mother stays home. He disguised restrictions as concern. He didn't want her stressed, or driving alone, or eating food he didn't approve of. Little by little, I watched her shrink. The energetic nurse I had raised seemed to fade beneath a fog of fear. She rarely visited, and when she did, she arrived with excuses prepared: why Marcus needed the car, why she couldn't stay long, why her phone had to remain nearby. One afternoon, I stopped by with maternity clothes a neighbor had given me. Marcus wasn't home, and for once, Hannah didn't seem rushed. She sat with me on the couch, rubbing her belly, laughing softly. For a moment, she looked like the girl she used to be. Then her phone buzzed. She flinched at the sound, snatched it up, and read the message with a sharp inhale. Her voice tightened. "I should start dinner. He'll be home soon." I followed her into the kitchen and saw her glancing repeatedly at the door, the clock, the shadows. When she reached for a pot, her shirt lifted, and I saw the faint outline of another bruise along her side. Smaller than before. Darker. Fresher. "Hannah," I said quietly. "That's not from slipping on the stairs." She froze, her back to me, gripping the pot so hard I feared it might break. When she finally turned, her eyes were glossy, and her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, please don't make me talk about this." My instinct was to wrap her in my arms and drag her out of that apartment, but she stepped back before I could move. Fear lived in her movements. Fear filled that kitchen. Before I could say anything else, I heard the sound of keys turning in the front door. Hannah's entire body jolted. She wiped her face quickly, straightened her shirt, and stepped away from me as though distance could hide the truth. Marcus walked in with a grocery bag and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The air in the apartment shifted the moment he entered, becoming tighter, colder. When he saw me, his smile paused just long enough to register displeasure. "Oh. Elaine. Didn't know we had company." "I was just leaving," I said, matching his tone. Hannah kept her gaze lowered, as if making eye contact with either of us would cause something to shatter. I hugged her despite the tension, holding on for a second longer than usual. She didn't hug back. Her arms stayed at her sides. When I walked out, I knew something inside that home was crumbling faster than she could hide it. A few days later, when I called to check in, Marcus answered instead of Hannah. His voice was too calm, too rehearsed. He said she was resting, that pregnancy was making her emotional, that I should give her a little space. When I asked to speak to her directly, his tone sharpened. "She's not available." Then he hung up before I could respond. A chill ran through me. It wasn't just control anymore. It was surveillance. Weeks went by in fragments. Hannah responded to texts with single words. She avoided calls. When she did answer, her voice felt strained, cautious, like she was reading from a script Marcus had forced her to memorize. And then, one night close to midnight, she called me. At first I thought it was a wrong number because all I heard was shaky breathing. Then she whispered, "Mom. I'm scared." I sat upright, heart pounding. "What happened?" Her voice trembled. "He got mad about dinner. I burned the chicken. Eli was crying. I tried to calm him but it made him angrier." She swallowed hard. "Mom, he pushed me." I felt the world tilt. "Did you hit something? Are you hurt?" "Hannah, tell me." I fell against the counter. "I'm fine. I'm okay. I didn't know who else to call." I grabbed my keys, ready to drive across the city without a second thought, but she begged me not to come. "He's in the shower. If he sees you here, it'll get worse." The terror beneath her voice was unmistakable. "Hannah, listen to me," I said, forcing calm into my words. "You and Eli can come stay with me. You don't have to stay there. There was a long silence. Mom, he says if I leave, he'll take Eli. He says he'll make sure I never see him again. My stomach dropped. Before I could answer, she whispered, I have to go, and hung up. I sat awake until morning, lights off, phone in my hand, replaying every sign I had missed. Every moment I dismissed as stress, every silence I ignored because I wanted to believe she was okay. I thought about the way she always looked at him. The way she apologized for things that didn't need apologies. The way Eli clung to her like she was the only safe place he had. When she finally gave birth, I visited her in the hospital. She held the baby with a tenderness that broke my heart. But even there, Marcus hovered, claiming credit for every decision, every moment. When nurses praised her, he stepped closer, as if to remind her who she belonged to. After they returned home, her exhaustion deepened. The cries of a newborn mixed with the constant criticism of a man who wanted control, not a family. His voice filled the apartment. His rules filled her days. His anger filled her nights. One afternoon, when I arrived with baby clothes and groceries, I noticed a baby monitor camera angled toward the kitchen. Too intentional. Too intrusive. I asked casually if Marcus installed it. Hannah hesitated, then nodded. He likes to make sure things are safe, she murmured. But her hands trembled as she said it. I knew then that patience would no longer save her. But leaving immediately could trigger him. And the most dangerous moment for a woman is when her abuser realizes he is losing control. Then came the night at the restaurant. The moment the entire world froze. The moment her son cried out for her while strangers watched in silence. The moment the truth stepped out of the shadows. After he dragged her by the hair, after the shock settled into every corner of that room, after I ran to her and held her shaking body, I made a silent vow, this ends now. The next morning, Hannah came to my house with Eli in her arms. She collapsed onto my couch, tears slipping silently down her bruised face. She kept apologizing, as if she had done something wrong. He said it was my fault, she whispered. He said I embarrassed him. I cupped her face gently. Nothing you did deserves this. Nothing. She cried harder. Not loud. Not messy. Quietly, like someone who has learned to cry without drawing attention. You don't have to know the whole way out, I said softly. You just have to take the first step. She didn't answer, but she didn't rush home either. And for the first time in years, there was a tiny crack of possibility. A breath of freedom waiting to be found that he held me for a long time, as if letting go would make everything fall apart again. I could feel his breath slow down against my shoulder, the way someone finally rests after fighting a storm alone. When he pulled back, there was a different look in his eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Just a quiet realization that I had been on his side even when he didn't see it. He wiped his face quickly, almost embarrassed, then managed a small smile, the shaky kind that appears only after crying too much. I didn't push him to talk. I just placed my hand on his arm and gave a small nod, telling him without words that I understood. His whole body loosened, and for the first time that night, he looked like himself again. The heavy silence in the room slowly turned warm, and he whispered that he didn't want to lose me, not now, not ever. I didn't answer right away. I simply stayed beside him, letting the quiet be gentle this time, not painful. It felt like a beginning we didn't plan, but maybe we needed that. He reached for my hand again, this time carefully, as if asking permission without speaking. When our fingers intertwined, something in him settled. I could feel it in the way his shoulders finally lowered, the tension dissolving little by little. We sat there like that, in the soft half-light of the room, breathing the same quiet air. After a moment, he whispered that he had been scared, scared of losing control, scared of losing me, scared of facing everything alone. Hearing him admit that made my chest tighten, not with hurt, but with a strange tenderness. I squeezed his hand gently, letting him know he didn't have to carry everything by himself anymore.